just let me first thank the organizers and Amina for putting these different sessions together and really organizing a sequence of people and topics so well that by now I don't have to say much. And that is the pleasure in this position, because a lot of what I was going to put on as data has been already put on board, partly the stuff on employment issues and Jawad stuff on the demography, and now especially on reproduction and family issues as well. In the way of introduction, I'm going to take you straight to conclusion, by the way, simply because I know you have had lunch, and I can see your eyes, unfortunately, that you're going to go down. And I'll start with this, that generations past, present, and future. And here, let me start by saying that generations have a beginning, a middle, and an end, but necessarily not in that order. I'm paraphrasing somebody else, which I'll tell you later on. And this is important, because when we talk about generation, it's about demographic and social trends that affect generations. Generation is not just a sequence of events. It's much more than that. I'll come to it in a minute. The end of the generation that what we have now facing, we have just been discussed by Hania, is that families are getting smaller. And that's crucial to the MENA region and across the world. So we have to bear this in mind. The second thing is that transfer of poverty within and between generations taking place. Generations do transfer poverties. If you look at the poverty right going back to many generations ago, poor families have poor siblings, have poor families later on. So we have to break this cycle. Family cannot be the only focus of welfare. That's another important conclusion which I'll come to later on. Hopefully I have data to show you. I haven't, by the way, I'm not moving backward. I haven't started this hypothesis, trying to prove them, but they have come out of the data, which are, well, information and analysis which I'm going to provide. And finally, social policies to support family and people focusing on vulnerability and not poverty alone. So this is the conclusion. So if you want to go to sleep, be relaxed. You have at the end of the movie, so to speak. Now, we come to the generations. Generation, as we know from the daily language, is about time and age. Basically organized in category of social process. That's important to bear in mind. So there is an element of time to it. Childhood, adulthood, going to old age. And these stages determined in part by biological changes, puberty, and social factors. For example, marriage is one stage of generation, moving from one stage to another. Military service, retirement. But except puberty, which again varies from person to person, the rest of the generational issues are social. So this is very important to bear in mind. So in the US, right now, somebody who is about 27 may be considered proper adult. We don't know. Even the American would disagree about this. Common social experience is crucial for the concept of generations. Peer group is important. Having an education, being the same work, going to war together, political events, etc., all of them term generations. So we should not bog down on simple time element of generation, but pay attention to the social side. And transition from traditional to modern societies, etc., has a continuity and change, which is shaped by the intergenerational relationship. The way one generation transfers culture to another is part of this move from tradition to modernity and the updating of the past, which we call modernity, which is happening in the region on a bigger scale. So that's why we see all these upheavals, changes coming together, and people are not stuck in the past. But this intergenerational thing is important. And finally, regeneration and social reproduction. This is crucial to the discussion. Generations do tend to reproduce, but the reproduction should not be based on the copy of the past, but renewal. And this is part of the mission of every generation, not to bog down the future generation to the model of the past. Now, basic the facts of generations and demographic change in the MENA region. These are started as facts. You have heard the data already, but I'll run through them very fast, very quickly. Fertility decline, mortality decline, and gradual decline in population growth rate. These are facts of the region. Demographic transition hasn't been completed in every region yet, but is taking place very fast. Young age structure, 15 to 24 the age group is 20% of population. This is a legacy of past high fertility. The basic issue is this, that population of this region is young. And that has to be acknowledged. And it is this generation which is going to inherit the region. Now, generation regeneration and the family in the MENA countries. Family formation, increasing age of marriage. We already know about this, and we had the data on Egypt. Delay in family formation because of economic reason, cost of housing, cost general and housing especially. Social reasons, autonomy and economic independence of women have been crucial in this. In countries where education level of women has gone up, the labor force participation has gone up, and they have more autonomy over their lives, they tend to marry late. It doesn't mean they don't want to be married, but they just marry later. So basically, families are getting smaller and moving towards a nuclear family over time. This is part of the urbanization, which brings down fertility and brings down mortality as well. Modernization and development and convergence across the world. This is nothing to do with, not just a feature of MENA, but across the world. We have a move toward nuclear family and a stable and a small family size in both urban and rural areas. Rural areas may be a little bit behind urban areas, but they are catching up very fast. Some simple data here for you. The data goes back to early 2000, but the demographic data do not change dramatically over 5 to 10 year period. So we can take this data as being fairly accurate even for now. Family sizes in urban and rural areas, in the Middle Near East and North Africa, in urban areas is 5.4, the line in red, in rural areas 6.1. And the family size gets smaller depending on the education of the head of the household, which basically what Javad was saying earlier on about the impact of education of both head of the household and women especially. That family size is getting smaller. So the more educated you are, the smaller family you desire, and the smaller family you have.
This is household.
This is family, not household. Yeah. Then we got the number of children within the families as well. You could call it household, but we didn't interchangeable in this. But this is family. You get number of children. You get again the number of children in the Middle East is getting smaller and comparable internationally. Something which is important to appreciate is this, that the family size, when the fertility comes down, converges between rural and urban areas over time. And that's important because you have a husband and wife and you have got a few kids. So the ratios are going to stay more or less the same. Now, family size and composition here. Average family size by type. You have a nuclear family, 4.7 on average, and all of across the country, 5.6. Ratio of nuclear to all types, 0.85. 85% of the families are nuclear type in the region. A stable family size for now. Decline in child and infant mortality, and more adult children at home for longer. So this is an important fact about the family. Families are getting smaller, and children are staying at home. Now, dependency ratios within families are going up. Dependency in the sense that the number of adults who are working the number of children who are not working as a ratio of the adults who are working, or who are supporting the children, I should say. This is basically a demographic factor. Is not based on work, but basically the number of dependent to independent, basically. So the question is family resource base and support enough? And family resource base and support vary in the region. That's the important point to remember. We have talked about the region, but the region is heterogeneous. The region is not uniform. You have got mineral-rich and poor countries. So mineral-rich and poor, labor abundant and labor short. poverty in rural or urban areas, and poverty and vulnerability. Basically, we haven't discussed this so far, by the way. The discussion has always been about poverty, but I want to bring the vulnerability side of discussion. And we have another angle to the discussion so far, which is migration and migrants, which I want to put on the agenda. Now, this data on poverty rates by rural and urban areas in the region dates back to, again, early 2000, and the situation has got worse now, by the way, because the condition in the region haven't improved much. If you look at the data, we see that poverty is a rural dimension. In all countries that are represented here, rural poverty is higher than urban poverty. And some even, shockingly, the high, but that's another story. Another aspect of poverty in the region is sensitivity to the headcount poverty rate. Basically, if you change the headcount poverty rate from $1 to $2, which is not much, or $3, we suddenly see a massive increase in the proportion of people who are poor. If you check, for example, Egypt, which is the most striking example here, going from headcount poverty rate of $1 on the left-hand corner of the graph, going up to headcount poverty rate of $4, which is to the right of the graph. The poverty rate goes up from basically from maybe 2 or 3%, shots up to over 80%. So using a poverty rate of $1 a day or $2 a day is not enough to capture the vulnerability in the region. And this applies to other countries, by the way. So our concern should not be just who the poor are, but who are just above the poverty line. Because these people could be dropped on the poverty line very quickly by one small change in the family circumstances. If you have one single operation in the family, if there's a health problem in the family, suddenly you go below poverty line. So the job of social security and social protection is to cover for such problems and not just identify the poor and go after them. So vulnerability has to be part of this discussion, and vulnerability of families is part of this discussion. Now, in short, poverty by any standard high in labor-abundant countries and resource-poor countries. So we should bear this in mind. The region is heterogeneous. Family resource is sufficient to cope with poverty and vulnerability? The simple answer is no. And it depends on labor market and employment condition, which takes me to the next slide, which has been covered extensively so far. High unemployment in the region, youth unemployment is high, unemployment higher among the educated youth, high female unemployment. Zafiris told me that we should worry about the size of the unemployed, the stock of unemployed people. I agree with him, I have no problem. Is it a middle class issue? Yes, it is, by the way, because the poor cannot afford to be unemployed. They have to get a living from somewhere. So there is an element to that. The middle class unemployment is relatively high. The other aspect of this is people who work, the low quality jobs, insecure jobs and vulnerable jobs. And what is the upshot of this? Migration from labor abundant to labor short countries. Now, we have got family and intergenerational support here now. Now, once I want to take your mind off family for a moment, because generation is not just about the family. Generation is not about micro side of support within a family or within a household. Generational support is about society, it's a social, it's societal. That is crucial to remember. So one generation is not that we ask mother and father to protect their children, and later on in life, children will look after their fathers, and continuously. The world hasn't survived like that. There has always been a social side to generational reproduction. So we have to come back to this when we discuss generational, intergenerational support. Family support themselves from own income and support from outside, self-employment or employment. Remittances are crucial within the region, especially, not especially, when we discuss the migration from labor-abundant to labor-short countries. A state is crucial, subsidy to basic consumption and health, and income maintenance. If we talk about remittances, 10% of the world remittances directed at MENA, and 20% originate in MENA. So people in the MENA country receive 10% of the world remittances, which is huge, especially we consider this is concentrated in a few countries with a large immigrant population. And in the region, about 7% of the GDP is derived from remittances in labor-abundant countries in the region, which is high, by the way. So countries like Egypt, Tunisia, Morocco, Yemen, Jordan would rely on remittances. So population in the labor-abundant country is very vulnerable, not only to shocks internationally, but also to domestic conditions. Now let us talk a little bit about the working poor. This hasn't been discussed in the region in the past few days. That vulnerability and the working poor is important. This is coming from the ILO data. And in the late 1990s, between 12 to 74% of working population were working poor. They were earning an income below the national poverty line in different countries. Yemen tops the league, 70%. Egypt is coming second, Algeria, Morocco, Jordan, Tunisia following. And you will be surprised to see Algeria there, an oil exporting, the rich country, and labor abundant. And Morocco is not far behind, 23%. So these are not poor countries, by the way, by the international standard, but still a third of the population in Algeria and a quarter in Morocco are working poor. They earn a living below the poverty line. Why do we have working poor? Well, low skills and low productivity and very low minimum wage, combination of the three. So we have to do something about that as well. Now, family, state, and human development indicators in the region. Human development indicators have improved in the region, but inequality across the region, within countries, social and demographic groups. So human development indicators have improved, but we see a big variation within countries. Family livelihood based on the use of own resources and state support. So we need to have a handle on two aspects of family. One is their own resources and what comes from the state. And what is next? I have 15 more minutes?
Yeah, 5 more minutes.
Okay, got it down. Okay. Okay, but the more I argue, the more time I lose. It's social policy and family and intergenerational support here. Now, if we focus on family alone, we should not ignore the gender dimension. If we push more and more support within the household, there is a gender dimension to it, and more will be taken up by women, by the way, in terms of care in the family. The other issue is this, that we are moving toward smaller and smaller families. So family base is going to be diminished, and this is important. Even richer families will not be able to provide the emotional support to their parents as we move on to smaller families. The objective of family support is maintain family resource base, and intergenerational support should be linked to three areas: goods, necessities, goods, labor, employment issues, and money market. Basically, goods, labor, and money market should be on the agenda. Money market, especially for monetizing future support for families through pensions. And we need to improve the household budget constraints. To non-economists, may come as a jargon, basically maintaining family income. How do we do that? Decommodify basic necessities of life: food, housing, and health. And I put emphasis on housing and health especially, because they take a larger proportion of family income right across the region and in a lot of other developing countries as well. Decommodification doesn't mean that this is free of charge, but basically regulating the market. So there is a range of decommodification from they would be taken out of the market completely at zero cost to the public to, let's say, the subsidy, which is partial decommodification. Improving human capital, cheaper and better health and education. And relate this to labor demand. We had a discussion already about type of education in the region and the need to reform of educational system to make the labor force more adapted to the market. Increasing labor demand both at state and private sector and improving labor force participation of women. But how we do this depends on country resource base, and I'm not going to go through with this because Zaferis is going to shoot me. I'm going to straight up to the...
I would not. You have 1 more minute.
Okay. Well, because since I have worn the bulletproof vest, I may protect myself for another 15 seconds here. I'm going to go to intergenerational issues and regional policies, basically, to touch on some discussion we have had here. Future generations will live in the same region, by the way. They're not going to move out of this region to anywhere else. Even the very rich among us who have already bought places in California or wherever, they're a very small proportion. So we are going to be in the same region, by the way. Need for some cross-country support, basically depoliticizing foreign aid. Any foreign aid taking place, we should depoliticize it to make it more integrated with needs in the region. I know it's difficult, it may be a wish list, by the way, but because you asked for politics earlier on, I'm going to give you some politics now. Integrated labor market at regional level for nationals and immigrants. I haven't talked about immigrants yet. Depoliticized immigration policy. In the first Gulf War, we witnessed that tens of thousands of people were chucked out of the region because of the support of the Jordanians, Palestinians, in favor of Saddam Hussein. Those immigrants who were here had nothing to do with Saddam Hussein or policies of the King Hussein, by the way. So they paid for the price, which in my view is very unjust. We need to move towards regional economic cooperation and common market, by the way. Can it be achieved? But at least we can think about it. We can dream. Maybe if we dream, this will happen, hopefully. And this has a political imperative for the region to come together in order to be able to generate, to support its future generation and not just push it into the family, but try to create an environment where we can all live together. Thank you very much.